It's Thursday, the 24th of July, 2025, and welcome to the Water Action Platform. My name is Piers Clark, and I'm the founder and a director of ISLE, an independent consultancy that works in the water sector across the world. Now, over the past 5 years, these Water Action Platform broadcasts have proudly presented, with the help of the sponsors listed here, uplifting stories from across the globe, and today is no different. Today, our focus is on water literacy, namely, how do we ensure that the people we serve in the communities that we cover understand and appreciate the true value and importance of water? We're going to hear from a utility about their outreach program, which has a unique twist, which I guarantee you won't see coming, an industry specialist sharing why technical papers are so important, and my colleague Reshmina will share her insights on the whole sci-fi/water relationship. But first, let's start with that all-important group, the young. How do we ensure that we capture the hearts and minds of our children such that they appreciate the importance of water? Well, to understand this better, I spoke to a children's author, Barr. Catherine is the author of Water, Protect Freshwater and Save Life on Earth. Catherine studied ecology at university and trained as a journalist. She worked at Greenpeace International for 7 years as a wildlife and forestry campaigner and has a long-running interest in environmental issues. I spoke to her recently to find out more about why she wanted to write a children's book on water.
Well, I chose to write a book on water because I write stories about big pictures for children, and I was fascinated by the story of water, so critical to life on Earth, and I write about nature and engage them in environmental issues. So I was really keen to discover the global picture of what's happening with freshwater and use my books to go into schools to talk about that issue. And in my journey and my research, I discovered all kinds of extraordinary things, which I always do, and particularly the rarity of freshwater, 3% of all the water on Earth. And that's a fact that astounded me, and also I've talked to children a lot about. And these amazing drawings by Christiana Engel that engage children in the story. I also was particularly interested in the role of water and girls' education, and I've become fascinated by that. And I work with an organisation called Freshwater, who do amazing work in India, particularly, who have been involved with the book. But also the book includes information about the water cycle, the fact that dinosaurs, we might be drinking the same water as dinosaurs. You know, kids find that kind of thing fascinating. So, and I also visited a jeans factory to find out about water and washing and clothes, and also the role of climate change in the water picture globally, which was incredibly interesting and important to talk about.
The bit I love there is it goes right back to your journalistic background. You're not just telling a story, you're researching through and building up a fact base and just following that narrative that you just described of that sort of catching fact. So little of the freshwater is actually usable by us. And that's what will jolt a child up to thinking about it.
Yes.
Covering the various challenges we have, be that from young girls and water and menstrual health, through to industrial uses with denim jeans factories. It's so good that you tell these stories in an engaging way that captures the young hearts, which does lead me to saying, why do you write children's books rather than adult books?
Well, I'm incredibly interested in engaging young children's energy and interest in nature, and it's critical for our future to engage young primary school children who can absolutely understand the big picture. And they're so interested, and there's so many ways to involve them, and particularly, I think, water, wetlands. Children don't think of wetlands. They don't. If you ask them for a range of habitats, they would never say a wetland. And I'm fascinated by wetlands. I've written books about the Okavango Delta, about the Amazon, and these habitats are so important, and the wildlife that's part of that. So I go into a lot of schools, and I produce each book that I do. Almost all of them have activity sheets that go with them. Take the plunge and write a poem about water, and be a pollution detective. So it gets them talking about these kinds of issues. And I've gone into a lot of schools, and they've started off making a pond in the school garden, with a washing up bowl. You can do it with anything. and it takes a long time, but that's part of the story. And engaging them, and they get incredibly excited. They ask questions. I get amazing questions, and it starts conversations and work projects in the classroom about water, and that's what I'm interested in doing.
Brilliant. Well, as a recent grandfather, I've got my own children. I'm now a grandfather. I am indebted to people like you who create these inspiring, engaging stories that will help the next generations embrace these issues. Now, I know that you're a person who does like to take on other challenges, and you're in the middle of, I think you're in the middle of a national challenge. Can you just finish by giving me a little headline on that? Because I think it would be good for the audience it tells us a little bit more about Catherine Barr.
Well, I'm at the beginning, certainly not the middle. I'm at the beginning. I'm walking alongside the water, the ocean. I'm walking from Land's End to John O'Groats over time. It might take my whole lifetime. And the whole point is to get my books into more schools and libraries in the UK. So I've just started. I've got lottery funding for the first section from Cornwall to Hay-on-Wye, where I live. And I've done 2 weeks. I've done 10 school events in schools and libraries, talking about my books, sharing these stories, and walking. And I love it. And it's fantastic just being outside instead of at my desk. And
I like to think of you as a rock star with a T-shirt that's got, tour dates that people can go to. You need to get a T-shirt,
yes.
the tour dates that everyone has.
I've got a logo, but not a T-shirt. Yes.
Catherine, thank you again for what you do. It's such important work, and we will share the link to your book and to all the people on the membership. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what I love there is how Catherine is banging those key messages that we as a sector need everyone to know, i.e. only 3% of the world's water is readily available to humankind, or the importance of wetlands. There's also an important point here around how vital it is that no matter who the audience, children or adults, books about water are well researched. Now, for our next story on the role of water in sci-fi literature, we're going to go to my colleague Dr. Reshmina William from Isle in the USA. Now, there is a reason why Reshmina was the perfect person to explore the topic of water and sci-fi. Reshmina, over to you.
One thing most of you don't know about me is that alongside my work as an engineer, I'm also an avid reader and creative writer. And it's in that role that I'm here today to talk a little bit more about the role of water in science fiction. But before I dive in, let's start with a definition. What exactly is science fiction? I like this definition by Robert Heinlein, widely acknowledged as the godfather of modern sci-fi. He says that science fiction is realistic speculation about possible future events based solidly on adequate knowledge of the real world, past and present, and on a thorough understanding of the nature and significance of the scientific method. In other words, science fiction lets us explore scenarios based on real-world knowledge, allowing us to tweak the parameters ever so slightly to allow us to ask what-if questions about our current society. In beginning our exploration of water in the context of science fiction, I'd like to start with a classic. Now, we've talked about Dune on the Water Action platform before, in the context of the science of Dune and the science of still suits in particular, but I'd like to take a moment here to discuss how Dune talks about the relationship between water and faith. In Dune, water is so ingrained into the culture of the Fremen people that's become a core part of their religious beliefs. Tears are considered sacred, and even in death, the individual's water is returned to the community in the form of death stills. Water is also entrenched in the Fremen's faith in the coming of a green Arrakis, the terraformed planet of prosperity and peace for future generations that they believe in so strongly that they're willing to go to war for it, even if they're not around to enjoy it for themselves. Kim Stanley Robinson's 40 Signs of Rain takes a very different approach to water. Robinson uses the lens of water and climate change to focus on how we think about science, the nitty-gritty detail of how science gets made in the everyday world, and how that science is perceived by the movers and shakers of society. His multidimensional cast of Buddhist monks, NSF scientists, technologists, political advisors, and diplomats are all trying to communicate the dangers of a changing climate. However, This is a cautionary tale of how even scientists can rationalize the irrational, and how it's all too easy to minimize the dangers of a slow-moving communal trend in lieu of individual gains until it's too late. Strikebreaker is a short story from the Nightfall collection by Isaac Asimov that explores the relationship between social taboos and the menial tasks critical to the survival of a civilization. The asteroid colony where the story is set relies on the efforts of a single family to recycle their waste into valuable resources like water. Due to their contact with this undesirable material, however, the family has been delegated to a class of untouchables, shunned by society. Unable to take the social isolation anymore, the most recent waste handler goes on strike, and the colony comes to the brink of collapse. On this world, as in our own, social constructs, not engineering principles, are the point of failure for a society built on haves and have-nots. And finally, we come to The Water Knife, a story set in the not-so-distant future where disputes between the Western United States over the allocation of water rights have devolved into an all-out war. Set against this grim backdrop are surprising moments of hope. Water brings communities together, whether that's groups of Texan refugees sharing their limited supplies, or hard-nosed journalists following the water and the money to uncover an unexpected way to help save our city. At the same time, The Water Knife doesn't shy away from showcasing the turmoil and destruction left behind by the callous, individualistic hoarding of water by those in power. Now, throughout this conversation, I've been highlighting stories about water, but really these are foundational principles that are the backbone of any good story. Stories teach us important things about ourselves and how we fit into the communities and the societies around us. They give us the chance to explore, to safely test out new ideas and concepts, and to metaphorically walk in each other's shoes. And that brings me to my final point, which is that in our work as scientists, we take on the role of storytellers. And the reason for that is that we tell stories in a wide variety of ways. Yes, through the written word, but also through images, through music, and through data. We do that to make sense of a world that can be vast and terrifying and beautiful, and to find our context and our place within that world. Our responsibility is to go on telling those stories and to allow those without voices to share theirs. Only then can we truly help to shape a more just and sustainable future for everyone.
Thank you, Reshmina. What a great message. If you share Reshmina's interest in sci-fi and or water in literature, please reach out to her directly on the details here. She'd love to hear from you. We now want to move from children's and fictional literature to the role of factual, technical water literature. To delve into this, I spoke with Jeff Johnson at Oldcastle. Now, Oldcastle is one of the world's leading players in the field of stormwater, and Jeff is one of those relatively rare beasts, someone who's been active in both academia and industry. I opened by asking Jeff to explain a bit about his background.
Yes, I've been with Oldcastle for about 4.5 years now, and prior to that, I was in academia for about a decade at North Carolina State University, and there I was with a stormwater engineering research group and at NC State, and by chance have on my NC State shirt here today, is the premier preeminent research group for stormwater engineering in the world. I had a great pleasure of being mentored by a professor there and then joining him to work and help lead his research group for a number of years, Dr. Bill Hunt. And he is, at the time, and he probably still is based off of how prolific his research team is, the most authored person in the world on stormwater engineering, with a really strong focus on field-based research and then how to translate that into the profession.
I'm so pleased you mentioned that, because the whole reason we're talking today is this is part of a broadcast around why do we need to keep educating ourselves on water. We've started looking at why we educate children. I think that's obvious. We want children to understand their environment. But why do we still need to do it once we've learned it? Why do you think we need to keep doing these research papers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of my favorite quotes. I'm a lifelong learner. I think it's really important. And one of my favorite quotes is Albert Einstein, and he said one time that the more I learn, the more I realize what I don't know. And I think that's true across any discipline, but in water in particular, and in research, that there's just so much that we don't know, and so many questions that we have and assumptions that we make about things. And research and writing help answer those questions, and more often than not, they lead to more questions than answers. And so we have to keep learning and keep asking questions and keep researching and putting the information out there for more folks to listen and think about and ask more questions.
Okay, when you're writing for an informed audience, as in an educated postgraduate audience who've done technical papers, what is the points you're trying to get across? What's the driving motive? My example being that if you're writing for children, you're trying to inspire them, you're trying to get them to think wider than the little world they're operating in. But that's not the case when you're writing a scientific paper or a technical paper.
I might argue that it's not altogether too different. One of the most important pieces of an academic paper is future work, the future work section. That's a one that a lot of people, they'll skip down to. They'll read the abstract, they'll read some of the findings, and they'll read the future work of what needs to be done based on
what's next.
Yeah, what are the questions that you have? And people build off of that and say, okay, these are what the experts are saying that we need to be looking at in the future. And so you're still trying to inspire and ask more questions and say, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, and how do we build off of this?
Excellent. I love this idea that whether you're writing for an audience that's 6 or an audience that's 66, inspiration is what you're after all the way through. So that begs the question, what was the last paper you read and what did it inspire you? How did it inspire you?
That is a great question. I read a paper out of Ohio State University. A good friend of mine is a professor there, and they did some work on looking at PFAS migration through bioretention, which is a common stormwater practice, and how PFAS is distributed and whether it's captured within bioretention at all. And it really posed more questions than answers. It did work some, but it was no real distribution, no real trend in its distribution to be able to target PFAS in any sort of like coherent way, which leads to more questions about PFAS as a whole and how do we treat it and capture it and from stormwater runoff, particularly from industrial sites. So that was my most recent read.
I love it. I love the fact that it's still inspiring you.
So you heard it loud and clear there. If we want something to be impactful, then irrespective of whether it's children's literature for a kindergarten audience or a technical paper being presented at an international conference, it needs to inspire. Now remember that when you're writing your next report. If you make it inspiring, not only will someone remember what you wrote, they might even act upon it. For our final story today, I want to go to Tasmania to hear from TasWater and to return to the topic of how we engage with the next generation. Now, many utilities have outreach programs to local schools with the aim of supporting teachers on the messaging to pupils about the importance of water stewardship. However, down in Tasmania, they take it one step further. I spoke with Matt Balfe, General Manager for Community and Customer, and Matt works with education specialists to increase water literacy across the island state. Their goal is to win the hearts and minds of Tasmanians, increase the levels of trust and change water use behaviour. So I opened by asking him to explain why they started this programme because, as you will hear, they were starting from a very low base.
TasWater is 12 years young. And we were originally 29 councils that were brought together under the umbrella of one organisation. Things were not working in Tasmania when it came to water. Just 5 years ago, for example, there were 24 towns on boiled water notices. So that means that people could not drink the water out of their taps without boiling it first. A lot of work was done to fix that problem. And I suppose until the last 3 years, really TasWater's tried to fly beneath the radar to get things fixed and to a standard that is just acceptable and within benchmark standards. But now we've got a big job to do to win the hearts and minds of Tasmanians, to gain their trust so that we have more social license to add more value to the Tasmanian community. But also we've got a big job to do with water literacy in Tasmania. We know that Tasmanians have lower levels of water literacy than any other part of Australia.
So what are you doing about it?
We're really on a mission now to transform our relationship with customers, to raise levels of water literacy, and to become a trusted community partner. So much more than pumps and pipes. And in order to do that, we've launched a new brand. And the strapline for that brand is "Water, it's Tasmania's thing." This is all about our role in water is as a steward. We don't own water. Water belongs to every person and the environment of Tasmania. And we know that if people feel like they own something, they're more likely to look after it and value it, which leads on to the second part. So water literacy, what are we doing there? We've run major scale campaigns, and we've seen a 5% decrease through these campaigns year to year. So between last year, we had a hotter, drier summer this year, but 5 litres per person per day less consumption. So they're really starting to work. And we're now moving to a point where we're moving into education, so into the school system. And we've developed a program called the Water Guardians. And this is a series of storybooks that feature native animals who teach children about the water cycle. We use what's called level 1 thinking, which is a psychological theory. And what it is we know that children particularly have an immediate emotional response. So level 1 thinking is that initial response before you start to move into logic. And children are cognitively more simple than adults. So they can become champions for your cause very easily. They have a natural affinity and attachment to animals, and they have a natural trust in animals. So they're fascinated by the stories that are told about the water cycle, but also the challenges that these animals face due to what humans are, A, putting into waterways, and also B, how people are using water, and that's not wisely at current. So this is going to be for every primary school throughout the state, and we've started the rollout. The take-up so far has been exceptional. And we will have an incursion series too, which is a theatrical performance that involves all of these animals and the storylines that we hope will be a really special, memorable experience.
I love it. There's going to be a touring theatre of water theatre. That is genius. It's building upon lots of utilities. Do the education programs. I haven't heard of anyone doing a theatrical. And I assume the children will play the roles. It's a script that you give to the schools, and the children play it.
We're actually out to market. Yeah, we're actually out to market at the moment to partner with a theatre company to actually go into schools, and it is performative, but also highly engaging in that it involves the children, brings them into the storylines. And I don't know about you, but there were a few occasions when I was a small child in primary school where we did have a travelling troupe come to the school for whatever it was. But they are imprinted on my memory forever. And I hope that they're the sorts of experiences we can create for Tasmanian children too.
Now, the TasWater water literacy program is proving a great success with a tangible reduction in water use across the state. By being a more visible community partner, TasWater has increased trust significantly over the past 18 months, and that mix of children's books and theatre is clearly just genius. If you'd like to learn more, Matt is always ready to have a chat and share ideas, and you can reach him at his email shown here.
With that, we come to the end of this month's broadcast, and once again, I thank our sponsors shown here. The next Water Action Platform broadcast will be released on Thursday, the 21st of August at the usual times, but in an exciting new development, we will be coming to you via LinkedIn. If you've not done so already, please email Anna Gunn so she can send you the link and follow the Isle Media stream on LinkedIn. Until then, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.